Now that Estelle has been out for a bit, we've had time to test her across both PvE and PvP. While her utility makes her stand out, today we're going to answer how good she actually is. With this, we'll go over her kit, builds, best teammates, and finally answer whether Estelle is actually worth pulling for. As always, if you enjoyed today's content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Now, Estelle's playstyle really revolves around her protecting her team while she slowly takes over fights. This is kind of the reason why you see her on more damage stat or more damage oriented sets alongside her more aggressive stat line. That said, her damage sharing keeps her teams alive, and her counterattacks apply injury and punish enemies for focusing her too aggressively. She also does bring reliable cleansing, making her especially useful into debuff teams, but that said, she's much stronger in long team fights as opposed to more fast-paced games, so she can struggle when immediate impact is actually necessary. Let's take a closer look though at her kit. The first thing we should actually talk about is her skill 3 though. This is her basic bread and butter ability. It deals strong HP scaling damage with 50% def pen, it applies injury, and it heals her too. Because this always crits though, you can fully invest basically into crit damage and HP as I've done below, but on top of this, her soul burn is also very strong as this reduces the cooldown by 2 turns, and this lets her cycle much faster. Now, her skill 2 is what's probably the most important part for Estelle as an anchor or a defensive Aureus holder. She shares damage with an ally, greatly improves their survivability, and she also gains fighting spirit at the start of battle for cycling and using more of her abilities. When an ally takes a hit though, Estelle will cleanse herself and counterattack immediately, and this gives her constant, honest punishment while also enhancing injury. Now, in slower bruiser comps, this passive is extremely annoying to deal with, I'd say, as you do end up injuring a lot of the higher HP characters, and you of course aren't really able to one-shot in a slow versus slow sort of team. Now, her skill 1 I think is also pretty cool. At base, this is a single target injury hit and also heals based on her max HP, but the important thing here is that when triggered outside of her turn through counters, both the damage and injury are increased, which allows her to chip away much quicker at enemy frontline characters. This also generates fighting spirit, and it basically, I guess after a few turns, will activate Wind of Protection, which grants barriers to the entire team and increases her CR, but overall her S1 is what really makes the whole kit kind of blend together. It's sustain, it's injury, protection, and disruption all at the same time. Now, as we move to build, something that you should keep in mind is that Estelle does have 3 pretty strong builds, but all of them focus basically on the same goal of maxing her value as a bulky HP frontline tank. With this, her recommended stat is about 30,000 plus HP, 230 to 300 crit damage, around 1500 defense as you're seeing here. No crit rate is really necessary, though I wasn't able to avoid this, and immunity set is pretty nice as for just preventing you from getting debuffed in certain cases. Now, as for sets, she does basically, in most cases, want counter set, and honestly, this is unfortunate as I just don't have a good enough counter set. But this lets her obviously trigger enhanced S1s for more injury, sustain, and pressure. As for destruction, this is what I had the best set of, and though this is more offensive, I'd say, she doesn't really need this too much, though again, having more crit damage does make killing a bit easier. Prot set is another option if you want to be more supportive, and obviously it's great for more bulky teams, or if you're just focused on surviving. With this, you'll prioritize HP, crit damage, and defense, and these are basically the only substats that you need, but the goal is simple: make her hard to kill while slowly basically whittling the enemy through utility and injury. As for artifacts, you do have a few options here. I would say that Adamant Shield is the best, most versatile option. The team-wide mitt is pretty good just for her. Now, as for her signature, this is usable, but it's definitely less impactful overall as this is more selfish, and the HP is fine, but you definitely want to avoid taking so much damage for the team as a whole. Holy Sack is another really OP artifact, honestly, in general, but it's a bit more general, and if you want to use it, it's fine, but this is kind of a bit 50-50 depending on what you fight against, especially if you encounter characters like the Hecades or the Briar Witch Iseria. Now, overall though, Adamant Shield is definitely her best option here, I would say, but now let's actually take a moment to talk about the teams that you may find her alongside, or some of the characters that you may actually use with her. The first character I wanted to highlight is Empyrean Ilanov, and this character is definitely very strong with her. However, alongside her you can find characters like Boss Arunca, characters like Biblis, who honestly is so disturbingly disturbingly strong, I should say. You can also find characters like Monarch Iseria being used with her too, which is another very strong knight. But you can kind of see a trend here. These are a lot of very tanky characters. There's also the question of characters like ML Bologna, who also is kind of strong alongside her. But you can also even find her being paired at times with characters like Disciplinary Arya. Now, one of her greatest strengths, though, is her matchup into Nodos, which may be a surprise for some of you, as, again, a lot of people, I feel, find Nodos and instantly kind of realize, oh, shoot, I forgot to ban him. The issue, though, is that her mitigation and sustain kind of reduces the amount of damage that he does after his S3. And injury, of course, allows him to, well, or allows her to survive and also weaken Nodos at the same time. Now, this is probably no more true than for something like Arena, where, again, if you find yourself in certain situations with Arena, you can slowly chip away or whittle against a Nodos comp, especially if you do end up pairing someone like Estelle with Evasion and the Ilanov here. I would show you Guild War, but it actually just turned past reset, so we'll start with Arena instead. With Arena, though, she's a solid Aureus holder, again, that contributes meaningful damage, but though I would say she also, or I'd say it's much easier to showcase just how good she is against someone like Nodos in something like Guild War, she also kind of does the same in Arena, though you do kind of need a few characters here to actually deal with some of the more disgusting and vile Nodos comps. With this, though, if you don't want to manual every single match, I do find that quick matching a lot of times with Nodos and some of these Evasion characters, it'll take a while, but it does end up working. If this doesn't, it's likely, again, because I'm on Destro, and counter is likely the variant, or the prot set is probably a variant that I can use here. But as you can see, it probably took a long while based on how long it took, but I did end up clearing here. Now, for RTA, I actually have a clip here that I wanted to showcase. And the clip here is pretty indicative of what I would say an average match with Estelle is going to look like in one of her more ideal turn or scenarios here. So you can see here, this is actually quite a long match. This is 5 minutes long. But this is a game that starts, honestly, with nothing going right for my team in general. This is just a bunch of characters that aren't able to be slept, or Nodos can't be stopped. He has immunity, and then guess what? Nodos gets to press S3, and for a lot of players, I think this is just the end of the line. Now, of course, I do have Ilanov here, and this does prevent some of the damage that I take here. But as we switch over and actually get to take a turn here with the Nodos, or rather when the enemy takes the Nodos S2 here, though he doesn't soul burn, take a look at how much damage someone like Nodos actually ends up dealing into Estelle. Now, of course, he didn't soul burn it again, which is fine, but the reality is that you only get one soul burn in here. And again, though I wasn't able to get it in this, or rather, though he didn't use it in this case, Estelle did end up taking only about 13.6k, or yeah, 13.6k damage here. And fortunately, because I had Biblis, I was able to cleanse. Now, I am fully acknowledging and aware of the fact that, yeah, I do have a few answers to Nodos here, but guess what? That's kind of the nature of epicseven right now, and I wish it wasn't the case, but being able to survive a Nodos S2 is kind of no joke. Now, to add to this, again, a lot of the other characters here ended up beating up the rest of my characters. That's fine. But the reality is that Nodos or rather, I should say, Nodos and his team was basically forced to focus the Estelle. And my Estelle here wasn't able to counter a single time. I was on Destro set. I didn't have counter. For this, though, I think this is pretty cool, as, again, you are able to stabilize quite a bit. And though you can see eventually Estelle ended up dying, I made it out of the transformation phase of Nodos technically in one piece. Now, again, as you saw later, because we were able to stall a little bit, we were able to then provoke. And this game was kind of close, but still exciting. And honestly, as someone that doesn't typically play Arya 24/7 or have like the best builds on these characters, I was pretty happy with what I ended up seeing with the Nodos specifically. Now, that said, of course, I do think that this is a character who does require a bit of thought and a lot of drafting in order to really shine. So I wouldn't necessarily call her the Nodos killer, but she sure was on a team that killed Nodos there, which I think is pretty impactful, especially as she wasn't just dragged along to the finish line. She was pretty impactful and was the first character that had to be focused and killed first. Now, as for this, or as we continue going on, I do want to say that in terms of PvE, her usage is fairly niche. Now, you could probably find some sort of scenario where you do end up playing against or you do find some sort of boss or some sort of fight where you can use someone like Estelle. But the reality is that Estelle is not really a character who works well, as she's more focused on being slow and mitigating, which is not really something that, well, you really focus on for PvP, or rather for PvE. A lot of the teams right now are very quick. They're aiming to one-shot, and that's fine. But that's all basically to say that, yeah, you might be able to use her maybe in a potential future Rift or something. But as for now, I would probably not recommend using her in PvE. Now, the last thing we should actually talk about, of course, is whether you should pull for Estelle, and I have some thoughts on this specifically. Now, from what we've seen already, I do think that Estelle is basically Smilegate's perfect version of a specialized character that I feel like they were intending to release. She's obviously better in slower turn 2 teams thanks to her damage sharing, the cleansing, the barriers, and the injury. And so with this, in my opinion, if you enjoy tank down gameplay, she's probably pretty good in the right drafts, of course. Her strength, though, is definitely coming from consistency, and while she doesn't win fights pretty quickly, it's very annoying for people to close out a game against her, as again, she just stays alive for a lot longer than you'd like. I would also say that into specific characters like Nodos, being able to mitigate some of the damage from his skill 2 is pretty impactful. And again, she is able to eventually return back to form and is able to deal lots of damage, heal herself, etc. Barrier, which I think is quite impactful. But outside of the comps that I've just described and kind of showcased here, her value is nowhere near as insane as you'd think. Aggro and cleave players, as a result, I'd say likely won't get too much for her. So overall, if you're an aggro or cleave player, I'd say this is probably one of the easier skips for you. If you're a turn 2 or a bruiser player, she's probably a strong but still niche option. And if you're a new player and aren't familiar with any of the terms I just said, or if you were just curious, or if you've just seen this character for the first time, she's likely skippable unless you really like her playstyle and the way she looks, in which case, feel free to pull her. Estelle, though, is, in my opinion, one of the best case, representations of what I think E7 is trying to release in terms of specialized or niche characters. And with this, I think Estelle is fine as she is. Thanks again for watching, though, guys, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Stay safe, stay healthy, good night.